Today, I'll be doing an in-depth critique on this drawing. I'll talk about how you can make a stiff pose feel more relaxed and things you can do if you're having trouble drawing clothing folds and wrinkles. There'll also be tips and tricks that you can use to make your coloring and shading more believable. So this drawing is by T. Chinese Baguette, an elf with bread who is a gunslinger cleric. So they struggle with clothing and they want to make it semi-realism like Reno Tuna or TB Choi. Okay, let's see what we can do. So first things first, I always start with a little paint over here and there, just to check the construction, so that's what I'll do. But I think the overall drawing looks good, and the face looks appealing, and the character looks cool. So good job with that. And I'll be focusing primarily on the clothing folds. Okay, so here's the thing about posing, right? I know that you've made it so that the hand is coming straight towards you, and that's not incorrect. But here's the thing. I would choose to angle the arm a little bit to show off more of it because it would look better. Just because the angle and the foreshortening you've drawn is accurate doesn't mean that it's necessarily appealing. Have you guys seen on Twitter where they're daring artists to draw this hand? Yeah, the straight on hand, right? It's like, yeah, that's fine and all, but like, do you really want to draw that? So I'm gonna adjust it. So I would just angle the arm a little bit so it'd be more like that. And also it helps to make him look a bit more relaxed, right? So I'm thinking about what to do with this hand over here. Because right now he's just kind of lifting the bottle, but it's not really resting anywhere. So I'm trying to figure out where I can make the bottle rest to make his pose look a bit more relaxed overall. Typically, if something looking a bit stiff, if you just drop the forearm a bit, it will look more relaxed overall. So let's do that. I mean, drop the upper arm. Because lifting your upper arm takes a lot. If you just try it yourself, right? Try lifting just your forearm versus lifting just your upper arm, like doing a chicken wing kind of motion. Lifting your upper arm takes a lot more energy because you have to activate your shoulders and all that stuff, whereas just your biceps and triceps doesn't take too much energy. We can have this kind of resting on his knee or on his thigh, something like that. If we draw the pelvis like this, actually gonna lower this knee just a little bit. That way his leaning posture makes a bit more sense if I kind of put his knees out this way. So I would do something like this. Then I can draw the barrel out here or something. And then the pose would make a bit more sense. Okay, let's make some changes. So the first things first, what is your light direction? When it comes to shading and rendering and drapery, one thing is you have to consider the direction of the light, right? And from here, it looks inconsistent to me. If I look right here, right? It appears that the light is coming from above-ish, but then you have shadow over here. So I guess it's like also coming from this side, but this is definitely a face that's facing upward. So you need to pay close attention. Oh, and there's a cast shadow here. So I guess the light is coming from this side-ish. Maybe kind of diagonally. It's just not super consistent. But first of all, let's just kind of fix the pose a bit. But hopefully you can see a bit of my intention with the changes here. There's a barrel here. I just make the barrel like this color maybe. I'm not gonna add shading just yet. Let's just kind of go over the different folds first before we start adding shading. No point just me shading away without explaining what the folds are, right? Okay, we don't need this anymore. Here, I'll just bend the knee like that. That might look a little bit more natural. There we go. Looks kind of flat for now, but we'll fix that in a second, okay? But here is like just me generally just trying to make him look a little bit more relaxed in this pose. So next what we're gonna do, let's talk a little bit about like how much do you actually know about folds, Chinese Baguette? There are a lot of videos out there that talk about the different types of folds. And if you haven't watched those already, or you haven't read resources about the different types of folds, I would encourage you to take a look at them. Generally, when thinking about folds, one reference is good, but like once you've seen enough reference, they kind of look the same to you. But is understanding the pressure points and where the things pull and where the surface of the material is. For instance, on these pants here, right? On these pants, you know that the legs make kind of a cylinder underneath, right? Which means that the folds will be kind of moving away from the surface of the leg like this. But also like they're tucked into these boots, so they would kind of go in there and create folds. You have to understand all these elements. And also he's sitting here, so then there would be a little bit of wrinkling here and rumpling here as the cloth kind of gathers up. You understand triangles? Okay. Especially where the cloth bends, there would be a lot of wrinkles there. And I think you generally understand that, right? In that case, let us proceed. Okay, let me just quickly do some line art as well. It's gonna have a little bit of shape here. So rendering, I see that your light source was coming from here, so I'm gonna keep that the same. And I think the one thing I notice is that you're very hesitant in your shading, right? Remember, especially when we're talking about direct lights, like reality is more cell shaded than you think it is, even with Reno Tuna stuff. I know that Reno Tuna and like TV Joy, they look like they use a lot of different colors. Stick with one first. So let's do some cell shading first, okay? So I'm gonna take this color and just add some shadows in. Like we do cell shading first. First, you gotta make sure your shapes look good in just 2 shades. Then, if you have time, you can worry about all the other stuff, but first it has to look good with just 2 colors. So I'm gonna simplify a lot of your values here down to one thing. Like this. Like there's a little bit here. Don't worry about that. We'll get back to that later, okay? This, let's make it a bit darker. A little less saturated, maybe. Same for your skin. Get some strong shapes in there first before you think about all that other stuff, okay? Beard as well. Like simplify, simplify, simplify. Because unless the basic shapes look good, then it doesn't matter how much fancy rendering you add, that won't look good. And it just takes time just to make this part look good, right? It's not super straightforward. You were skipping steps? I mean, if you get experienced enough, you can skip steps, but I'm a novice at shading, right? I'm a noob, so I can't skip steps because I'm still learning, okay? If you get good enough, then you kind of already know, but it's kind of like drawing guidelines, right? If you've drawn something 10,000 times, maybe you don't need guidelines, but for someone like me, I need guidelines. I can always go back in and clean, but I'm worrying about the big shapes right now, and on the contrary, if I zoom in too far right now, I'll have a hard time determining those important big shapes, right? When it's nice and big, I can look at the whole thing and make sure it looks good. If you look at one single tree, you will miss the entire forest. True, yeah, you'll miss the forest for the trees. So make sure you got that right. So here's how it looks so far, right? I just added cell shading, right? I just added cell shading and simplified things. It actually looks more believable than adding a bunch of different like hesitant colors, yeah? So the next question somebody might ask is like, okay, I did the cell shading, where do I go from here? I know what Reno Tuna does is now he does it from a grayscale to color method, but afterwards he does the cell shading, he'll be like, okay, so where are some subtle colors I could add elsewhere to help describe the form that I can't just do with that? But he keeps it very rough. You can usually see all the brush strokes. He'll start adding stuff like this right now. It's like, oh, okay, I want to describe the subtle form here, but I can't quite do that with just these 2 colors. So that's when he starts adding them. So we can add like some here. There should be a cast shadow here. Like maybe some on the face over here. Maybe there'd be some lighter colors right there. Like you don't really need to add much. Just one extra color will go a long way in helping you describe that form. And we're like, oh, I actually want a little bit of something over here. Okay, we do it, but don't overdo it. Make sure that these shadows you add here, you don't want them too dark, okay? You want to keep them very light to make it very clear that these are just like different planes still in the light. Keep your values tight when you're adding shadows to the light here, okay? At this point, you can add highlights if you want. Like here and here. Or to your bottle, which I think you did. Not quite. So we'll add a bit. And you can add some reflected light to the shadows as well. Again, you want to keep your values grouped. You spent all your time making these lovely shapes. Don't ruin them. So don't start adding like reflected light like this and stuff, okay? Because you're breaking up your shadow shapes. Just do something very subtle. Like maybe you just drop the saturation a bit and you can paint a bit of reflected light like this. Be very subtle. Maybe there's be some reflected light from this thing, so paint that in too. I just sometimes like to do something like this. And that's how you actually get those soft transitions in. Yeah, the barrel blends in a bit, but like we're not focusing on the barrel today, yeah? I'm just dropping the saturation just a little bit here. Painting some reflected light over here. What'd you do over here? Oh, I forgot to do these. It's a bit too dark. Let's say this one. You can blend a little bit, and you can soften the shapes a bit, but don't break up the shapes too much. I know Reno likes to take a brush. He doesn't blur or blend. He keeps the brush strokes there. So, you know, you can just do like a soft opacity a little bit and do a little pass here where you blend in some parts where you want to blend, but don't overdo it. All right, do you see what I'm doing here? All right, this is very rough, but hopefully you get an idea, okay? So this is how I would achieve the kind of rendering you might be thinking about. All right, I will just put these from side to side. In fact, I think you could make the shadows even darker. So you could just get a linear burn layer. Let's grab like, that's too dark. Just like increase the separation between the light and the shadows even more. Because I feel like you can crunch all these values together a little bit. So let me see if I can try that. Tonal transformation, tone curve. Something like this. Okay. There you go.